Welcome to Scott Field, Davis Wade Stadium. It's game day again, Mississippi State fans. First time in 28 days. It seems like more than a month, Steve, but it's been a good month in a lot of ways. Yes, State had 2 bad losses, but they used the open date to get some things fixed. And now you had a chance to watch the team get out there, warm up a little bit, and kind of get an idea of what you think the Bulldog mindset is going into this home game, which really 2 home games this in Kentucky, which kind of are the swing point of this entire season.
It's true, David, and as we discussed before going on air with you guys, is that Bulldogs have some simple goals today. Win the ball game without a lot of trepidation and without any injuries, and get ready for Kentucky. And that's as simple as we can put it, Dave. Yeah. This is a team that needs a win, obviously, after playing 2 of the better teams in the country. But there's a lot of people that wonder, how good is this Bulldog team? You know, LSU loses to State in record fashion, then struggles with Syracuse, loses.
All of a sudden looks a little bit better themselves.
Absolutely. Syracuse beats Clemson, and then, you know, when Troy beat LSU, then all of a sudden Troy loses to South Alabama. That's the cannibalism that is a non-conference schedule sometimes, David. So this could be a good measuring stick for State, not because of the fact that BYU is expected to bring a big challenge, but if they do, then perhaps this Bulldog team is not quite as good as we'd hoped they'd be.
I think it's a good summary there, and the scores we mentioned are really more a reflection not of relative strengths and weaknesses. It's the fact that you've got to be ready to play every day. The margin's not that big, and I think if the Bulldogs didn't watch those games last night, where the heavily favored team, and State is favored by over 3 touchdowns, you saw what can happen if you're not ready. Brigham Young is not your normal opponent. We're not talking so much stylistically, but the mentality is an older team. It's a veteran team. Yes, they're 1-5. Yes, they've lost 5 straight, but they're coming to Scott Field believing they can win this game.
And, David, they should. They won the game last year, and while it kind of in a flukish fashion, and quite frankly, State gave the game away, that should be all the motivation Dan Mullen needs. He shouldn't have to say anything other than just turn on the tape and say, guys, you let this group steal one from you last year. You got to go out there and play to the best of your ability. They have to come out today and play, not with the tightness perhaps they play with Alabama, but with the urgency of an SEC opponent.
It's a good summary, too. Now, a couple of notes here in pregame. Martinez Rankin will not play today. We understand Greg Island will, as expected, get the start at the left tackle position. And, of course, State could do some things like, you know, they could move Elkin Jenkins around. They could move Deion Calhoun around. There's flexibility in this offensive line. But here's a good test for Island, who I thought acquitted himself reasonably well under the circumstances at Auburn.
It's true, David, and you're going to have 2 redshirt freshmen starting at tackle, which is not ideal in this league. But the bottom line is, if this is going to be the way things have to be for a couple of weeks or for perhaps the rest of the season, you know, you've got to get some guys ready. Not to mention the seeds you plant this year, that's the benefit you reap next year. And so, you know, my hope is that Martinez Rankin is able to come back in November and play with some real ability. But if he doesn't, you've got to get Greg Island ready, and you've got to decide what your game plan is going to be. And this week is probably the only week you're capable of doing that.
The other player expected to be out, Corey Thomas, as we thought about all week, will miss this game as well, and with that foot problem. Gabe Miles is supposed to return today. We don't know where they'll start, but he'll certainly be in the wide receiver rotation there. We'll be watching for things from wide receivers. You know, this is a game where it'd be a good chance for them to make some plays they have not been making the last couple of games and take some of the pressure off Nick Fitzgerald and the interior receivers.
I agree, David, and I think, as we mentioned yesterday, it's one of those situations where you want to throw to kind of set up the run, because at its core, this is a running offense when you've got a running quarterback. And so you've got to be able to make some plays down the field and get those safeties out of the box. And I think State will probably take a shot early in the ball game. If they can come out, hit a haymaker early, I think it'll get the crowd into the ball game. And look, we're not expecting a capacity crowd today. Very late arriving crowd. It's a difficult day for Bulldog fans, especially the ones that have Friday night obligations, to get up early on Saturday and be here. So I think State needs to start early, and I think BYU is one of those teams, because of their experience, because of their maturity, if you let them hang around, they may make just enough plays to make it interesting.
Well, you're hoping a team from the Mountain Time Zone shows up a little bit late for today's game. Speaking of being out late last night, you had a chance to watch, I believe, West Point play a ball game, and Mississippi State commitment out there. What are some other guys who may be visiting today? Because obviously it's not a big recruiting day because of the early start, but maybe a few recruiting tidbits going into today's game.
Well, official visitor Jerome Carvin out of offensive lineman out of Tennessee will be here. Bulldog commitment Joe and Maiden is expected to be here this weekend. They played earlier this week, so he's able to make the trip, come in, spend some time with the staff. Stephen Guidry, wide receiver commitment out of Hines Community College, expected to be here today. So there'll be some local guys. We'll have some Starkvillians, we'll have some West Point kids, and there'll be some others. But it's not going to be a huge numbers weekend, but it could be some very important players on campus. And obviously we have an opportunity to spend some time with the staff because of the early kick and then hopefully see a Bulldog win.
A few other notes from today's game. No bowl scouts are here today except the Senior Bowl, and thank you, Spellcheck, for making it, when I said the Senior Bowl will be ripped here today instead of repped. I guess they're working out, but hey, they've been changing whenever I type Mixon, they type Dixon, so what can I do sometimes, these Macs? I should have stayed with PCs. Also, we talked earlier this week about officiating. All of us who were here in 2001 for that humiliating show by the Mountain West Conference officials, no problem there because BYU's independent. We thought it might be an SEC crew. It turns out it will be a Big 12 crew, and the crew chief is Dan Romeo. I could not make that up. So Romeo, wherefore out there? Well, you're actually out running an officiating crew today on Scott Field. As Mississippi State host Brigham Young, 11 o'clock kickoff. Steve and I will be talking post-game, hopefully some good news, wrap up the interviews we have, maybe get a few feedback comments from how people thought the day went. And it's game day here at Scott Field. For Steve Robertson, this is David Murray.